You are listening to Her View from Here, the podcast where successful women share stories and experiences about overcoming adversity and achieving excellence. Her View from Here is brought to you by Baird, an employee-owned provider of financial advice and services for individuals, businesses, and institutional investors around the world. Nationally recognized as a great workplace, Baird is committed to inclusion and diversity and fostering an environment where women feel encouraged and empowered to realize their aspirations. And now, Her View from Here.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Her View from Here, where remarkable women share their stories and experiences of overcoming adversity and achieving excellence. I'm Julie White, Managing Director with Baird Private Wealth, and today we'll be taking a closer look at what's become a really exciting segment of the consumer market, women's health and wellness. Joining me today are two experts in this area from Baird's global investment banking business, Wendy Nicholson and Lauren Liebert.
Happy to be here.
For having us.
Great. And let's start with you're letting our audience get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little about your background and how you're working with companies in the beauty and wellness space. So, Lauren, let's start with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julie. Super excited to be here talking about one of my favorite topics, which is all things women's beauty, health, and wellness. I am a director at Baird in the consumer group. I've been at Baird for over 10 years, but doing investment banking for 15. And really, during my time at Baird, I've had a very strong focus on women's lifestyle brands, which has morphed in recent years to a really specific focus on women's health and wellness brands. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic, and I'll let Wendy introduce herself as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Yes, I'm newer to the Baird platform, just joined the company 4 months ago. Prior to then, I had been with Citigroup and its predecessor companies for more than 30 years. Pretty much all of that time engaged in the consumer area, most recently working in equity research, covering a broad range of consumer staples companies across beauty, personal care, household care, food, and beverage. And I'm thrilled to be at Baird, partnering with Lauren on this important initiative, and thrilled to be joining the podcast today.
Well, welcome, Wendy. We are just thrilled to have you as part of the Baird family, and especially in this area that really is so exciting and the future so bright about how we can really play a role in helping companies in this area. And Lauren, just loved the work that you did in the Baird's Women Wellness Showcase recently. Loved reading that report. If you haven't seen it yet and you're listening in today, make sure you go to rwbaird.com and search for it. It's really a fascinating discussion about you talking to several women entrepreneurs about their experiences, how they're bringing ideas to market, and the stories of challenges that they're having and how they're achieving success. It's really some compelling stories, and it's changing so much. So tell us some about what are the dynamics that you saw there, and what were some of the things that came out of that experience that really resonated with you?
Yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. I had the opportunity to interview 25 women founders, CEOs, and leaders of women's wellness categories. Our goal in putting together the showcase was really to highlight a diverse array of brands across many different wellness categories, many of which are fairly nascent in their development. So we talked to leaders of companies in menopause, fertility, sexual wellness, menstrual health, vitamins and supplements, ingestible beauty. And, the focus of the discussion was around their perspective on the state of women's wellness and where they see the industry going from here. And I think it's been really fascinating to watch the wellness landscape evolve, especially over the past couple years. I think women have always been the biggest advocates and the biggest consumers of wellness related products, activity, and content. And I think that's because women have had to go out and find their own solutions. in a lot of cases to issues that may have plagued them, or maybe their doctor wasn't able to give them a specific recommendation. So it was fascinating to talk to these founders across the landscape and hear what they're doing as it relates to promoting women's wellness, and just an amazing group of women. So please check out the interviews and the takeaways piece if you get a chance.
Thanks, Lauren. It was so interesting to read those, because growing up, a lot of those were considered taboo topics that we just didn't talk about, but we were all dealing with them. So how do you see that, social media has really given us a platform to discuss some of those topics and share best practices? What's been that impact over the last 10, 20 years?
Yeah, and I would say social media has definitely been a good tool in encouraging and fostering the dialogue. People find communities that have similar values to them, are sharing similar stories. Maybe people are going through similar issues. And it's really created this amazing place for people to share and kind of connect on a more personal level. I think broader, though, I think that, in general, I need to be perfect, or, being told that I need to look a certain way or dress a certain way or buy certain products in order to be, healthy, well, or beautiful, that has all really turned on its head over the past, several years. And I think that dynamic, coupled with social media, is allowing women to find communities where they feel supported and where they feel like they can, find people of like-minded thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of how even advertising, or the way we're starting to see things, that they're more real people. So Wendy, you talked about, you've been in this industry for many years. So how have you seen that changed, and how are women really wanting to see themselves represented by the brands and the companies that they support? How have you seen that starting to evolve and change?
Yeah, it's interesting. What I've really seen is an increased willingness on the part of some of the bigger sort of consumer packaged goods manufacturers, increased flexibility in terms of how they target those women, in terms of the products that they sell. I think for a long time, you could almost say that some of these larger companies, the more traditional sort of heroes in the space, might have been a little bit slow to react to the changing environment, and understandably so. These are companies who've been in business selling things like soaps and detergents and shampoo for a very long time, and have become very profitable at doing that, very successful at doing that. But to sort of have to change their business model, not only in terms of the products they sell, but how they sell, maybe new distribution channels, maybe new packaging, maybe new marketing messages, a totally different way of communicating. It's no longer putting just a picture of the product in Good Housekeeping or People Magazine, but actually developing a social media presence. I think it's taken some of the big companies a while to adapt, but increasingly they're seeing the payback. And so the message we're hearing from the companies is more of an open-mindedness and a willingness to be more flexible in terms of what they sell, how they sell, and how they market it.
It's really fascinating. And even in those large companies, are you starting to see leadership changes in them? Are more women represented in leadership that can relate more to some of the issues that are important to women?
Well, I would say just pure statistics, many of those companies are still heavily dominated by men at the C-suite. No problem with that insofar as those companies have been very successful. They certainly have all made a deliberate effort to make their board more representative of the customers they serve. And I think that's terrific, so that in the boardroom, they get the feedback in terms of some of the different initiatives they're promoting, or some of the different strategies they're unveiling or prioritizing. And to be fair, I think we definitely see more women coming up through the ranks, which is wonderful, particularly in the beauty or personal care segments of some of those larger companies. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
It is. It's great to see. Sometimes change happens slower than what we want, but sometimes it gets pushed along. And Lauren, that really is what you're seeing by a lot of the entrepreneurial women that are out there leading companies and driving change. So what are you hearing from them, and where did they come from? Like, were they in larger companies? What did their career paths look like as they're starting some of these new companies?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. And I think the answer is they come from all different types of backgrounds. But one of the common themes around several of the founders that I spoke to was that they previously worked at large institutions. So L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble, Target, for example. And, they really saw the unmet need in the marketplace for certain types of products. Both Sally Mueller of Womaness and Angie Tebby of Ray Wellness came from Target. And so Sally developed products around menopause. Angie developed products around vitamins and supplements. And they're uniquely positioned to do that as women because they understand what women need and maybe what isn't already available in the marketplace. So for a lot of time, beauty companies, wellness companies have been marketing to a very specific consumer, which is somebody between the ages of 18 to 45. But I think increasingly that is changing, where older women are a part of the conversation as well, as they should be. And I think it's fascinating to watch that dynamic evolve.
I think it's also important to remember that in this space, when you look back at history, it's actually been populated by a lot of really successful female founders. Let's not forget Mrs. Estee Lauder or Helena Rubinstein or Mrs. Mary Kay. I mean, these are people who have created brands decades ago that still live with us to this day, even though their businesses and their brands have moved on a lot. I think there's a great sense of perspective that can probably be gained by how those women created their brands, built their businesses, and the legacies they've left. That is now being picked up by some of these younger women who are creating their own businesses.
Yeah, that's so true, Wendy. And they were great trailblazers that we had that were wonderful examples. And so how do you think COVID and what we've been through the last couple of years, how has it maybe accelerated some of the change in this industry as well?
So COVID was absolutely an accelerator of a lot of these trends that we're now seeing. And I think really one of the predominant themes that has come out and really continues to be a driving force is just how important wellness is in somebody's life. It's self-care and taking care of yourself. It's no longer one day when I have time, I'll take care of myself. People really saw during the pandemic, and women struggled disproportionately on average because, more of the child rearing responsibilities, elder parents, working jobs. And it was a really difficult time on everybody. And it was a really difficult time on women. And I think that focus on making sure we stay safe and healthy has continued to pervade the consumer's mindset. And in fact, we're seeing real trends, lasting trends around how the consumer prioritizes their wellness spend. Very often it's one of the most important things in their budgets and how they think about, living their lives. So I would say that has been, a positive development that has come from COVID.
And the other thing I'd chime in there as well is, the reality is that during COVID, when a lot of us were at home, and even since then, we've gone back to work, we're out socializing and returning to kind of normal or pre-pandemic behavior, but still for a lot of us, we're doing hybrid work and we've got more time at home. So some of the companies, that we speak to have really promoted more at-home alternatives. So if you can't get to the salon or if it's more expensive, than you're comfortable spending right now, there's a wide array of products to do it yourself at home. That said, I would say that Lauren and I also do speak to a lot of companies engaged in beauty services, and they all say that everybody's very excited to be back, able to get facials outside the home, manicures outside the home. So the good news is you can take care of yourself at home, but you can also now leave the house and engage in some of the stuff that helps you feel good and look good.
Absolutely. I mean, the pedicures I did from home were a disaster. So glad to be back. But also, one of the things that we've seen as a growing trend, especially with millennials, is that they choose to spend more on experiences versus things. And now we're really seeing a lot driven by COVID, them spending more, allocating more to their self-care. But now that age group is starting to grow older. So how are we going to see this prioritization they put around self-care play out as they start to age and go through different stages of their life? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're totally correct in that millennials, and I would even say, Gen Z is also exhibiting a lot of the same characteristics. I'm an older millennial myself, and it really has become the focus much more on experiences versus buying things that maybe only bring about temporary happiness. And experiences also hopefully contribute to some sense of work-life balance. I think there's also a changing paradigm just in the way that millennials are shopping for beauty, health, and wellness. They have incredibly high standards, and Jelly, as you noted, that generation is aging and actually is about to, the oldest millennials will start going through menopause soon. So I think it's really interesting that, some of the trends that we've seen, I think as these younger generations come up, these are long lasting impacts. And I think you're going to see, the trends for many years to come.
Great. Well, speaking of menopause, I know when I went through menopause, I found a new doctor because I wanted someone who hopefully had gone through it or at least been well trained in it, because it's like, what just happened to my body? So in the healthcare community, in the medical community, are we starting to see expectations change about how we want to receive healthcare, what our expectations are of our healthcare providers as well? What changes and evolutions are you seeing from that front?
Yeah, so I definitely think that women have been pushing for a different standard of care for a while now. It's been amazing to me to learn through the course of working on the Women's Showcase and interviewing so many influential founders and leaders in the space, just how little traditional healthcare has focused on women, especially from a clinical research perspective. I thought it was, really fascinating that premenstrual syndrome, which affects 80 to 90% of women, gets about 20% of the funding that erectile dysfunction gets, which only affects 10% of the male population. And women are different than men. I know that's obvious, but if you take a look at a lot of the research, women have often been ignored in developing and prioritizing drugs and products that would benefit them. Back to the menopause point, another stark statistic that I learned from Jill Angelo, who founded Gennev. It's a telehealth platform focused on women in their post-reproductive years, was that menopause is actually an elective course in medical school, and only 1 in 5 OBGYNs is actually taking that course. So you think about where women go when they start experiencing what they believe are symptoms of menopause. They most likely start with their OBGYN, but more often than not, that person is not as prepared as they should be to help them, navigate menopause. And another interesting thing I learned was that I think there's 35 different symptoms of menopause, and every woman experiences them differently. So you can imagine how, treacherous and confusing that time is, especially when the resources are so limited to support you.
But
I don't have to imagine. I lived it.
And I would add, back to one of the questions you had earlier about sort of the role of social media, the importance of having, the ability to communicate with like-minded or people going through similar phases of life. This is another area where I think historically maybe women were less comfortable asking questions, particularly, with a male doctor, someone they'd known for a very long time. It hasn't been. We call it taboo topics, but the idea now that you can have a community of friends online, that you don't necessarily have to identify yourself. You can ask questions. There's information flow where you can get smarter and more well-informed. So I think that's actually been a part of the path, if you will, towards making some of these topics more mainstream. You develop a little bit of confidence when you realize you're not the only person having these questions or suffering through some of these symptoms. And maybe that emboldens you as a consumer or a patient to talk to a professional and seek help.
Yeah. So true, Wendy. I remember when the first heart study on heart disease came out for women, and they're like, we just never included women in our trials before because they had these monthly cycles and just screwed up our testing. We're like, but that's real. Like, that really happens to all of us. And then we learned so much about heart disease in women and how different it presents itself than men and how to treat it differently. So we have come a long way, but where are we going? So if you look ahead 5, 10, 15 years, what do you see out there of all these catalysts of change that have happened recently? Where's it going to take us in the future?
Absolutely. And I think a big part of our focus is, we help brands raise capital or find minority or majority partners to take their brands to the next level. And I think we're at a very interesting inflection point right now where we've got a lot of women-led, women-founded wellness brands that, we're still in the very early days, probably inning number 1 in terms of the amount of investment that's going into that sector. And Wendy and I are incredibly passionate about working with those founders and helping them secure capital such that their brands can continue to grow and thrive and be part of the story, 10 to 15 years from now. So I hope there's much more of a level setting between the amount of funding that women-led businesses get versus male-led businesses. Right now, it's not even close. Women get a fraction of the percentage of investment dollars. And I think a lot of that is, unfortunately, a lot of these private equity firms and venture capital firms, still fairly male-dominated industry. And it's harder for them to invest in businesses that they don't understand. But I hope as some of these topics continue to become more mainstream, that we'll see them leaning in once they see the opportunity for growth. I hope we'll see them leaning in more to support a lot of these great businesses that deserve just as much funding and just as much support as other businesses.
And that's what I would say, some of these large consumer packaged goods companies, really have yet to engage in some of these conversations. Obviously, there's some very large players who dominate the feminine hygiene category, but even they haven't, gone to the next level necessarily in terms of embracing the menopause conversation or embracing or selling, or producing or researching all of the adjuncts, if you will, to those categories. There's certainly opportunity. I think, it's amazing. And we've just talked about this, how much change there's been just really over the last 2, 3, 5 years. Some of that may be brought on by COVID and some of the changes in behavior that we all went through during that period of time, this increased emphasis on self-care, this increased emphasis on communication. But I think still there's a let's see how it all shakes out. There are a lot of small brands that have launched. They won't all survive, but some will. And among those founder businesses, one of them is going to end up being the next Mrs. Estee Lauder, and her brand is going to be, ginormous over time. It's just a question of giving these brands and businesses and people time to grow and evolve in the consumer environment, to demand and support those businesses over time.
Well, we appreciate the work that you all are doing in that area and the support. And you're really creating also a community of women entrepreneurs that may feel like they're out there on their own and they don't know who to talk to. I mean, things you're doing like the showcase and other things to bring women entrepreneurs together to share experiences with each other and grow from that is just a wonderful way to start. Keep it advancing what's already been an exciting evolution in the last few years. But let's talk to the women consumers. So, I mean, we vote with our credit cards, with our, how we spend money every day. What are the things for everyone that's in the audience today that's a consumer? We control a lot more of household spending. 90+% of women will manage the total financial household at some point in their lives. So how can we become more informed? How can we support the brands that really are moving us forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And women control so much of the household spending. They have tremendous spending power, not only for themselves, but, many times often for their partners and their children and their families. So, I think to the extent women are interested, doing your research and finding brands that you feel like align with your personal ethos, I feel like that's become much more, I don't want to say trend because that makes it sound like a negative thing, but people are realizing the importance of sort of putting their money where their mouth is. And we've seen a lot of mission-driven brands, education-led brands, really find these loyal, diehard consumer enthusiasts who also go out and promote the brand's message. So, do a little research, see where the product comes from. There are a lot of amazing brands out there doing incredible things, and we can all support them in some small way.
And don't be afraid to speak up and ask questions and reach out. I think there's a remarkably large and strong and passionate and well-informed group of people out there. So I think the idea that there's someone with an answer to any question you might have, I think is important to remember.
Yeah, great advice. It's taking some time, doing the research, and then sharing what you learn with your community. The networks that we have, women are such natural sharers with each other, and we're just expanding the topics that we're talking about with each other a great deal, and we can really help move this forward for all of us. So this is such a unique juncture in this whole industry, and you all are playing a big role for us at Baird in supporting women. So tell us for each of you, when you think about the next, we'll just say 24 months, what are you the most excited about what you get to show up and do every day? And what excites you most about the next 2 years?
You want me to start, Wendy?
Yes, I've got to think about my answer for a minute.
So I think my favorite and the most exciting thing that we do, and it's been this way for some time now, is just all the amazing women founders, but founders that we get to meet in our line of work, and really passionate people, really intelligent people, like very inspiring people. So I would say making connections with founders and companies that are serving women's health, beauty, and wellness in some way. We love to meet those type of women and people. And, I think as our network continues to grow, we also like to try to be helpful, whether it's an introduction to this person who might, be in a similar space or industry, or an introduction to this person who might have a capability that the company is looking for in order to continue to grow. So it's the best part of my job. Wendy may echo that. But it reminds you kind of why you do this. And that's what I really love about it.
I would agree with all of that. I would also add, a little bit more of a personal comment in that, after 30 plus years of being at the same firm and doing the same thing and loving every minute of it, and waking up last year and making a change to a very different platform, very different group of people, I'm just excited to be meeting new people. The Baird community has just been off the charts in terms of being so welcoming. It is a special place, and I feel privileged to walk into the office every day and to partner with people like Lauren and you, Jilay. So really, for me, that's what's bringing me joy right now is realizing that I'm working a different muscle and having a next chapter in my life, and that's been fantastic.
It is really exciting to see where this is going to take us as an industry, certainly as a firm, the difference that we can make. And, Lauren, I think you're right, is you're just being that connector, the opportunity that you and Wendy have to do that for so many women on their journey is what makes it fun to show up every day and really with such passion and make such a difference. We really appreciate both of you being with us today. And for anyone that's interested in our audience to really dig deeper into that showcase we referenced earlier, you can find those interviews and some great takeaways on rwbaird.com. Just search under Women's Wellness Now. And for more information about the way Baird can help business owners and entrepreneurs plan for their own personal success, visit bairdwealth.com. Thanks again to all of you for listening to Her View from Here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Her View from Here. You can find more episodes and learn more about Baird's commitment to helping women achieve their aspirations as clients and associates at rwbaird.com/women@Baird. That's rwbaird.com/women@Baird.